Tattooing, outlaw or indigenous? Before we get into that, I'd like to share with you a little bit about myself. I've been getting tattooed for over 25 years. I've been tattooed by 35 people, and I've been working as a tattooer for over 21 years now, most of that time in Arcata, California. Tattoos came to me as a kid. Uncles and cousins would return home from military service, and they had bright, bold tattoos on them, and I was really intrigued by it. To me, it represented adventure, danger, and honor, which were exciting subjects for a little kid. I was around 8 years old at this time, and I don't know how it all came to be, but I remember drawing all over my dad's back on several occasions. And little did I know where that was heading. As I got older into my teen years, tattooing kind of fell away, and even though I was into skateboarding and music, punk rock, any kind of subculture I could get my hands on, I was the product of my environment, the conservative suburbs of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Patriotic, hardworking, church-going, traditional American lifestyles. So with that in mind, there wasn't much happening with tattoos, and around this time I remember my mom saying, "Hey, I think I might want to get a tattoo." And I told her, "Mom, you do not want to get a tattoo. We are not that kind of people. It's not for us." Little did I know that, this would be happening, and then I eventually tattooed my mom and my grandma. So as I went further along, I continued on with my skateboarding life and music, and tattoos kept popping up again in that culture. And then from there, in my early 20s, I got into my psychedelic years. And that's when tattoos were happening again, and I decided the time was right for me to get my first tattoo, a little sun on my arm that said infinite possibilities on it. And it's something I still live for today and exercise through my work. So, unbeknownst to me, from my first exposure to tattoos in the 1970s up to getting my first tattoo in the 1980s, we were in the midst of a full-blown tattoo renaissance. But how did we get there? And where do tattoos come from? And why have they been outlawed around the world repeatedly in various cultures around the world? Whether it's the Pictish warriors of Europe, the Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, or the people of the Middle East, all practiced the art of tattooing to express their own lives. So where did tattooing go from this indigenous act to an outlaw act? Well, there's a lot of perspectives on that and different cultures involved in it. So I'm just going to talk about it today from my own perspective as an American tattooer working within the Western tradition. So let's go back to Europe. It's the year 781, and Pope Hadrian I makes tattooing an outlawed act. And each pope subsequently followed with the same decree. So here's where we see tattooing going from this indigenous act to more of an act of rebellion, or something that's taboo and not allowed. Now, as time progressed, European sailors began to take to the waterways looking for golden land for the countries they represented. But as they were traveling around the world, they came across something that they had never seen before, and that was tribal tattooed people. And they had a great interest in these people. And in 1691, they brought a Pacific Islander with them, Prince Giolo, back to Europe. He was from the tiny Micronesian island of Yap. Now, when Prince Giolo got to Europe, he was there to be exhibited for the sake of profit. And unfortunately, he died of smallpox shortly after his arrival. And while his time on Earth was limited, his impact was strong, and he was a catalyst for a Western revival in tattooing. Now, over the coming decades and centuries, the sailors continued to travel around the world and constantly came into contact with these tattooed people. And as people do, they began to mimic and emulate each other. And they came up with their own style of tattooing, which represented their lifestyle, the seafaring lifestyle. And this is where we see the genesis of the Western tattoo tradition. Now, they continued that up into the middle 1800s. And at this time, tattooing went from the waterways to the land. And people could get their entire bodies tattooed and display themselves in a carnival as a sideshow attraction. And when they weren't in the carnival showing themselves as a sideshow, they would have a booth where they would offer tattoos off of design sheets, similar to what you see here. Now, as these people continued to travel around Europe and the United States, they began to settle into communities, establishing the first tattoo studios, first commercial studios, similar to what you see today. And that was in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. And this continued on and peaked out around World War II. And at that time, the military clientele created this great wave of tattooing. Now, after World War II, tattooing began to fall a bit out of fashion. And as we came to the early 1960s, several states and municipalities made tattooing illegal. New York City, Milwaukee, where I came from, Oklahoma, South Carolina. It's only been 10 years since the last state re-legalized tattooing. So now we get into the outlaw era of tattooing, and we find ourselves in the middle 1960s. And with a wave of energy that came from the Vietnam War and the introduction of mind expansion drugs to the culture, we find ourselves in the era of the outlaw, tattooed, rock and roll hippie biker. And that's still going on today, thankfully. But as we get through that phase and come into the early 70s, we find a new group of people interested in tattooing. People that are coming to the field with fine art backgrounds. And with that, we see the design work changing, and we see the clientele expanding. And this just keeps going all through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s, where we are today. And now tattooing has become very mainstream and very acceptable. And while it's still a practice that's consumed by outlaws and weirdos and all kinds of people, it's come to a place that we can all accept it. Now, for me, I've always been interested in cultures other than my own, and I've been really fascinated with their tattoos. And when I first came to tattooing, one of those styles that I saw was the Micronesian style of tattooing. And there's an example of it there with the Yap tattoo. And to me, that was just really mysterious, and it was a simple design work, and it was bold and very easy to read. And it just had a really big impact on me. So going forward in time to now, as a tattooer, we were in the studio, and we had a student from Humboldt State there. And he let us know he was going into the Peace Corps, and he'd probably be going to Yap. And I thought, wow, Yap, I can't believe you're going there. I hadn't really been thinking about it much because I've been involved in my own contemporary work. So our daughter was graduating from high school, and we wanted to go on a big adventure to celebrate raising our child. And I thought, Yap, that would be an awesome place to go. Let's go there. And we talked about it with my wife, and we agreed, yes, we'll go to Yap. So I start looking into it, and I find the only artist on the island of Yap, Mr. Leo Pugram. And I got into contact with him, and we became friends over the internet. And I asked, when I'm there visiting, if it would be possible to perhaps perform a few tattoos if anybody wanted them. Would it be okay if I sat in at your shop? And he agreed to it. And he also asked if at that time I would make the traditional Yapese back piece tattoo for him, like you see there. And of course, I was honored to be able to do that. And see, tattooing in Yap started to fall out of fashion around the middle 1800s with the arrival of Christian missionaries from the United States and Europe. And by the time the Japanese took over the island in 1920, they made it an outlawed activity. So it had been illegal to get tattooed until the United States became involved with Yap. And so with that in mind, it was just a great honor to be able to make something like that for Leo and to bring that back for the people of Yap as an example of what their culture was and what it can be again. And so we were able to make that tattoo for him, and it's just such a great honor to be able to do that because when you, thank you. With tattooing, we're just kind of all riding off of the backs of each other and continually progressing, and we're just so thankful for everyone in tattooing that came before us and the people that have allowed me into the profession. And we're also really thankful to all the outlaws of Humboldt County that support me in our shop and allow me to go off and do things like this. So, tattooing, outlaw or indigenous? Both, and it will continue to be so. Indigenous people are once again getting the tattoos that were a part of their lives and are a part of their lives again. And the people in the West are now in an era of acceptance and free to explore an ever-expanding group of designs to express themselves with. So thank you very much for letting me share a little bit of that information with you today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.